Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Have Your Story Straight, Why Brand Message Dilution Hurts in the Experience Economy. A few logistical notes before we get started. You'll see two different ways to communicate with us throughout the webinar, the chat box and the Q&A box. Please use the chat box for all technical issues and the Q&A box for any questions related to the content of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce Zoe Dowling, our SVP of Research here at FocusVision, and Chris Wallace, President of InnerView Group. An eclectic blend of researcher, technologist, sociologist, and marketer, Zoe uses her extensive research expertise to help clients best apply FocusVision's technological solutions. As co-founder and president of InnerView Group, Chris's mission is to help companies better align the strategies of the boardroom with their daily execution at the front lines. At this time, Zoe and Chris are going to jump right into the presentation. Let's get started.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and welcome, Chris. Absolutely delighted to have you on this webinar this morning or this afternoon, depending on where people are listening from, to discuss the findings of our recently released research that we partnered on. And I think it's a fascinating study, and I hope everybody on the line listening with us today will also feel the same. So with that, why don't I hand it over to you to kick us off?
Thank you so much, Zoe. I appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for attending today. I'm also excited to not only share the stage with Zoe, who's been a great partner in this research, but also to share these great findings with all of you. First of all, let me start by saying that I hope to someday be described as an eclectic blend of anything. I don't know exactly what that blend would be, but hopefully at some point I can be an eclectic blend of something. So what I want to do is jump in with and tackling one of the key ideas and key messages behind the study, which is this idea of the experience economy. That's a big phrase, a big concept. When you think about business today and some of the hottest topics, you hear about customer experience. And when you hear a phrase like experience economy, I feel like people's brains can go in a lot of different directions. So what we wanted to do is start up by level setting everybody. When we started doing this research, what did we think the experience economy was? How did we put that into context for what we were looking to find? So I'm going to start with a personal anecdote. I'm sure that many of you would have a similar story to this, but I want to put it into terms that hopefully everybody can relate to. When you look at what's on the screen right now, when you see the words "just do it," everybody has an image of what that means. Everybody connects that to something other than just the meaning of those three words put together. It has become so iconic in our popular culture that Just Do It is associated with Nike. But it's not just associated with a brand in terms of what their products are, what their goods are. It's really become associated much more with a movement, with a state of mind. Just Do It really is about pushing boundaries. It's about challenging yourself. It's about not accepting the status quo. It's become a rallying cry. It's funny to think that a brand, just in the 30 plus years that it's been out there, that this phrase "just do it" can come to mean so much, not just to us as individuals, but to us as a collective society. It's so much a part of their brand. It's completely connected to the Nike brand. And what we think about the experience economy, it's really about how is an organization taking that view of their brand, that image of their brand, and making sure that it is threaded through all the way down to the experience that a customer has when they interact with that company. How do they take Just Do It and get it down at the front lines so when a customer interacts with Nike, whether it's in a store, it's online, that Just Do It comes alive in every one of those interactions? Well, I have a personal example of where that didn't necessarily happen. And I'm going to introduce you to somebody right now. This is Patrick Wallace. This is my 6-year-old son. And Patrick likes to refer to himself as sporty. He's sporty. He wants to wear sporty clothes. He wants to get sporty birthday gifts. He wants to watch sporty shows. Anything that has to do with a stick or a ball or a sport, Patrick's all about it. And when you think about Patrick and his life as a consumer, he's starting to get big enough to the point where he's hard on gear. He's hard on apparel. He's hard on his hat, his baseball glove. He's especially hard on a pair of sneakers. Now, typically, Patrick will have a pair of sneakers for 5 to 6 months. And at the end of those 5 or 6 months, it looks like a dog got a hold of them. They're pretty much ripped to shreds. But recently, we took Patrick to a Nike outlet, and we purchased a pair of sneakers for him. And about 10 days after we bought them, the sneakers started to come apart. They were clearly defective. So after about 2 weeks, he tried to wear them a little bit more. But after about 2 weeks, we had to set them aside because they weren't safe for him to wear anymore because they had come apart. So we took those sneakers back to the Nike outlet. And we brought them back in and we said, here are the sneakers. Listen, we know he's a little boy. He's hard on sneakers, but he only had them for 2 weeks. It was about 2 months after, so we didn't bring them back right away. It was a little bit further from our house. And the person I spoke to at the counter said, I have to talk to a manager. So he called the manager over, and the manager said, explain the situation to me. I explained the situation. And the manager said, give me 1 second. And he goes and he gets on a little headset, gets on a little radio, talks to somebody, comes back and he says, I'm sorry, sir, we don't handle defective merchandise in the store. That's not something we handle here, but I can give you an 800 number to call. So I have a pair of defective shoes that my son is not able to wear anymore, well within what should be their normal lifespan, even for a little boy like Patrick. And they're telling me, we can't help you. We have rules. And yes, Mr. Customer, you drove out of your way to come to this outlet center to be able to return these, but we can't help you. And what I wanted to say to that manager of that store was, just do it, man. Just do it. Don't tell me about rules. Don't tell me about obstacles. Don't tell me about barriers. When I think about what Nike stands for, they stand for the opposite of the experience that I was just having. That's the experience economy and the way that we thought about it, and Zoe and I thought about it as we looked at the findings from this study, was how are organizations taking that brand that they've worked so hard to build and making sure that that brand lives on in every single one of those connection points. Because in this instance, it didn't. And when I'm in an outlet mall that has an Adidas store and a Puma store and a Skechers store, what is Nike doing in a commoditized industry, in a commoditized world that they live in of sneakers are sneakers, shirts are shirts, shorts are shorts? They have a commodity product. They need to deliver on an experience that makes it differentiated, makes it better. If it was a just do it experience, I would want to stay there at Nike, but it wasn't. So we faced the option of where do we go next and where do we take our money next because Nike's not living up to it. That's how we think about the experience economy. And again, we just wanted to frame that up. So take the phrase and make it something that's a little bit more real to each one of you as you hear the statistics and you hear the findings that we're about to share with you. So what were we looking to find? It's important before we dive into the results. What were we looking to find when we set out to do this study? Set out to find out what these professionals had to say. Now, with our team at InnerView being consultants, we are marketing consultants, and the folks at FocusVision being customer insights platform and technology company, we were really coming at it from two different angles. But it was really neat to see how those two things overlapped. But the goal starting out was, from my company's perspective, how do marketers view that connection between their brand promise and their brand experience? How do they think they are doing? Would they say they are doing well? Would they say that there's dilution? How would Nike say they are doing? What is their perception of how well they are delivering on what they are promising through their advertising, through their digital spend, through their social media, with the actual experience that their brand delivers? So that was mine. Zoe, we'd love to hear yours.
Sure. So no surprises, as you said, that we, being the experience insights technology platform providers, we were interested in what role, and I will say, if any, does customer insights play in ensuring a consistent brand message? Is there a connection there? And also looking to explore what are people doing, how much they're doing, how much they're leveraging their research. So we were definitely taking it from the insight side to see, is there a role in customer insights in ensuring a consistent brand message is being said throughout the company, throughout the organization?
Thanks for that. I think that's a great lead into, I think it was very interesting to see how these two perspectives were going to converge. We didn't know how the data was going to play out and how we were going to see how it related to the FocusVision mission, the InnerView mission. I think we, at the conclusion of this, you'll see we ended up much more in lockstep than we probably anticipated.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting piece from it. It's when we came at it from these two angles, and you think that they are quite. Is there a connection here? And in hindsight, when we looked at the data, and as everybody's going to see, as you just alluded to, Chris, you know, there is a lot of overlap. But this is what we went in with, and I think, yeah, we're going to start to go into some of the key findings.
In theory, to your point, Zoe, in theory, we went in with the assumption that companies are probably spending money to learn about their customers, and they are probably building their marketing strategy off of what they know about their customers. They are spending money to deliver that message to their customers. And we wanted to know, is that happening? And is what they know about their customers and what they've built their brand upon actually trickling down? Are those things actually trickling down to the front lines to match the experience with the promise? So yeah, we're going to jump right in with our key findings. We're not going to dwell too much. We're going to jump in with our key findings. We have 4 key findings to share with you today. And I'm going to throw it over to Zoe to do that.
Yep, and I tell you what, Chris, as the good researcher in me, I'm going to do a little bit of a background on who we spoke to. So we spoke to 250 senior marketing, customer experience, product executives and senior directors and managers within US companies. And so this is the findings that we got from that. I'll also do a plug if you're interested in the full report. We would be glad for people to download it and take a look at the results. But as you said, Chris, we're just going to be going through some of the key findings here. So that's my researcher hat on, and who did we speak to, and where did they come from? So what we found.
Can I add one thing to that, Zoe?
Yes,
if I could, I'm going to add one thing to that. These were large companies. Yes. They were $250 million and above in annual revenue. The overwhelming majority were 500 million and above. There were only a handful of companies that were in the 250 to 500 range. So we did want to see, we wanted to target big brands. We wanted to find out how this is working for bigger brands, the Nikes of the world.
Yeah, and that's a great build, because I think that does frame who we spoke to. So it wasn't just, you know, your marketers and the senior executives that we spoke to, but also from very large companies. So let's have a look. So the first, again, as a reminder, coming at it from the insight side is, well, what role, if any, does customer insights play? And to also what you had said, Chris, you know, we were curious. It's like, well, we know that people do research, but how much research are they doing, how they're leveraging it, and where does the brand story fit in with all of this, and particularly as it pertains to going through the organization and everybody speaking to a consistent story. What did we find? Well, delighted, again, as a researcher, delighted to see that the very vast majority of companies are doing are saying that their companies doing research on customer needs and preferences. So 94%, so that's a large amount. So we've got people saying, yes, we have some sort of research program in place. Now, kind of interestingly, we did see a lot of that research was around brand customer experience. You know, that's something, a lot of the voice of the customer, where you're doing that post-transaction survey. Generally, that's what it is, going out and seeing how things are going. And then there was slightly less research done around product and different areas around messaging, advertising messaging, and so on. So we are seeing a lot of research being done or within the organizations. But what was interesting, and I think a little bit disappointing, if I'm honest about it, was that just over half are saying that they're consistently using research to shape their brand and product messaging. So a little bit of a first flag going up around, well, we are having research being done, but actually we're not necessarily leveraging that research to its full potential, and we aren't always applying it to shape our brand and product messaging. So that was the first thing we found. Yes, Chris.
If I could jump in, so I would just say this surprised me. This was not something that I anticipated seeing, that there was that much of a fall off between gathering the information and actually leveraging it in building your brand message. I did hear an interesting story the other day from one of our clients, a large client, and they told us, we were talking about one of their recent major product launches, and they have a whole messaging campaign around that apparently came from, they were in a meeting and one of their executives was trying to explain the product to somebody, and they took what he said and they just turned that into their entire campaign. Well, and it's not bad. I'm not running down on my client. I'm just saying it was very interesting to hear that for a company that has volumes and volumes and volumes of customer research, that the brand messaging and the product messaging wasn't built around what they knew about the customer. It was built off of what an executive said in the meeting. So this does happen. I've seen it in real life recently, but I was surprised to see the number be that big.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great anecdote, if you like, because I think it's not surprising. As we say, we know it gets done. The disconnect that seems to start to come into play, and I loved your story around Patrick and the trainers and the experience and the lack of experience that came with the Nike interaction, because it did bring to life today. It's like, it is all about our customers. They're supposed to be around customer centricity. And so when we're building out our brand stories and messaging, it would feel to make sense that actually leveraging all the research we have, going directly to the source, going directly to the customer to build out that messaging is how you're going to be most successful. So like you say, it's surprising that there is just over half saying that research is consistently used to shape brand and product messaging.
No, it's interesting to see, and I think that I'm gonna tee you up for kind of the key insight here. What's your big takeaway from that, Zoe?
Well, for me, and I'm going to put my hands up and say, of course, I'm a researcher, and I'm going to say this, but I really truly believe this. What we took away from it is that you need to ask and keep asking, and by that you've got to continually ask your customers. It doesn't have to be large, these large scale hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars of research in a big study. It's more sort of agile, to use a term that's been used a lot today, but I think it's got a lot of weight to it. It's, let's be nimble, let's go and speak to them. We're not quite sure if this makes sense, so why not do a quick 20-30 minute online interview or short focus group to verify, is that message correct? So again, if we take that example of that brand manager or CMO that said the messaging came entirely from him, well, okay, so maybe it's good messaging, but why don't we go and quickly verify this? And there's different ways to do that in quite an agile, nimble way that doesn't cost the earth, to say quick online interviews, focus groups, a quick pulse survey, a short survey. Let's just double check this messaging and see that we're on the right track. So ask and keep asking. And then the second part of it is use the data that you have, actually leverage it. There's absolutely no point collecting data if it's just going to sit in some sort of, I'm going to call it digital vault, because we don't generally have our reports printed out anymore. It's becomes a bit worthless then. It's meaningless if we're going to go through the actions of conducting the customer research, understanding their truths, understanding their worlds, and then doing nothing with it. So ask and keep asking, and then actually leverage the data, use it. Let it inform not just your brand and product messaging, but all sorts of other areas that it can inform, because it's going to make you stronger. So that's what my takeaway from that is.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And for those of you listening, it's really important to us in doing this webinar that we don't throw a lot of stats at you and leave you hanging on what to do with it. But for each one of our key findings, we're going to talk about what our key takeaway is and kind of what direction we recommend that you take that, and how you can be using that in your own day-to-day activities to take the information that we learned from the study and actually turn it into something valuable for your company. One thing I would quick add to that commentary is, when you think about leveraging what you have and using it, as an organization that works a lot with frontline teams, down in the trenches, so to speak, from sales to retail to call centers, customer data, customer insights never make it down to those folks, or rarely ever do. Whether it's marketing doesn't know that people will know how to process it, or they don't package it up the right way for them. But those are the folks who talk to the customers, and all they know about the customer is what they hear on the phone or what they see in the store. They don't have any of that backstory. It would be really helpful for them as well. So that's part of leveraging it.
If I could build on that, because I think that's a really important point that you brought up there, Chris, is that, the great thing about customer insight, customer research, is that everybody within an organization is hearing, getting feedback from their own lens, from their own department. So if you're in customer service and you're problem solving all the time, troubleshooting, then you are going to hear a lot of the more challenging aspects of that in dealing with the brand. And so you might not think that the messaging coming out makes sense, and vice versa. I mean, because we can learn a lot also, not just by talking to our customers, but also speaking to our employees. And I think that's the other thing I'd say is actually keep asking, include your employees in these, because this is your brand. They make up your brand. And so it's a two-way street. But also sharing that research, as you've said, is really incredibly important, so that everybody knows it's not just the case study one. It's not just the opinion of whomever is making the decision about the messaging that's coming through, that it actually is based on some solid foundations. And I think that would go a long way as well to making everybody feel that they are truly walking to the same beat, that they are walking to the same end goal.
Great point, Zoe. Thank you. Gonna jump into our next key finding, and I think that these are some of the items that we used in headlines in promoting this webinar and really promoting the study, because they were pretty eye-opening for us. We expected there to be some quote unquote dilution, but what we found was the story is breaking down, and this goes back to my objective of really trying to understand what marketers, product managers, and customer experience folks felt was actually happening inside their own organization. This is their input. What we found was 66% lacked confidence that people inside their company can tell a consistent story. And the key word there really is consistent. If a customer hears one thing in one touch point and another thing at another touch point, that is dilution. That is the dilution that we are talking about. If I hear just do it on TV, and we are backing controversial athletes, and we are taking on controversial causes because we are all about just doing the right thing, and then my experience is bureaucracy, those two things don't line up. That is dilution. So when we think about how we ask this, it really is, if there's a lack of consistency and people are not hearing the same story, the message that was created and millions, in some cases tens or hundreds of millions spent on advertising to promote, is not connected with that customer experience, you have a real problem. The question is, how big is the problem? Now, this is going to get into a source of regret for Zoe and I, as the researchers who led this. We asked, how much do you believe a consistent story is worth to your company? If you had a consistent conversation happening across all your customer touch points, how much is that worth to your company? So our highest category was 10+ million. 62% of the respondents were in the 10+ million category, which is a great indicator to us. We should have had a higher category than 10+ million. I would have added a 20+ or a 25+, just to see, and again, these are similarly large companies. They are large organizations, but I don't think that we had a high enough figure there. Zoe, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I completely agree. Just the number, and it makes you wonder, is it, as you've said, is it 20 million? Is it 30 million? Is it 40 million? Clearly, though, what we did get from it is that it's worth money, serious money. This is what people believe, that having a consistent brand story that is told across the organization in the same way is going to generate revenue for you, because it has positive implications for the customer. Just to speak to some of the findings, it was talked about having a positive view on the experience that they have, on loyalty, on purchase, and of course advocacy. And these are all business outcomes that we're driving for. And so if having a diluted brand story is the case within your organization, then effectively it seems that you're missing out. There's opportunity to be gained from actually making sure that your story is aligned.
It's an excellent point, Zoe. And I'm going to come back to that concept of the experience economy. With the experience economy, and for those of you who are not familiar, there was an article in Harvard Business Review, I believe it was 1998 that it was published, that said we're moving out of, we were a product economy, then we were a service economy, now we're an experience economy. And to really take that theory and apply it here, what that means is that purchasing decisions are made at the point of sale based on how the customer feels they were treated. And I know that won't come as any shock to anybody based on recent trends around customer experience and trying to improve customer experience. But when you talk about the tangible impact, one of the issues with customer experience is organizations trying to find ways to measure it. And we believe that this idea of dilution and trying to, measure dilution, which we do at InnerView, but also to understand how that impacts transactions and retention and things like that, there really is a direct line into return on investment or true evaluation of the cost by saying, if somebody is not explaining to a customer or conveying to a customer truly who we are as a company, that is going to lead them down the path of they don't trust us because we don't align with our marketing messaging. They're going to go to our competitors. If the story is not crisp and the differentiation clearly understood, they're going to keep shopping. They're not going to feel confident in their purchase decision. This has implications for transactions every minute, every day for the organizations that we talk to, whether it's in the hospitality industry, the auto industry, the retail sector. Every one of those industries is going to face this on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah. I think
so. What's our...
Sorry, go ahead, Chris. I think the key implication here is an important one. The key insight.
So, thank you. I mean, in terms of the key insight here, this might be a little bit unexpected, but I'm going to take this down to the true, going with the true scientific process here, which is that's the problems that we just talked about are not problems you can fix with a magic wand. You've got to figure out truly where do you start? How do you start to take what's leaking right now and start to recapture some of the drops that are leaking out of the bucket? And our recommendation for a first step is identify who is, or obviously here I have, or should be responsible for message consistency. There's a lot of cooks in this kitchen. I think what we found from the research was organizations are doing things. They're taking strides. We'll get into this in a minute to try to deliver this message, but they're probably not doing enough. I wouldn't say that it's the people who are doing their jobs right now, whether it's the training department, the marketing department, the sales team, or the sales operations team, are doing a poor job. It's less about whether or not they're doing a poor job and probably more about, are they doing enough? So figure out who's responsible, figure out if you actually have the resources to do this. In our experience, most organizations are under-resourced in really accomplishing the connectivity between the corporate team and the field team. So doing that an inventory, if I'm the head of a brand, if I'm a CMO, or if I'm a brand strategy director, I want to know who is responsible, who is the single source I'm going to try to understand how consistent is the message and how can we make it more consistent. And I'm making sure that we're properly resourcing that person to accomplish it. Because the investment here is going to pay off in what we just talked about. More transactions, winning more deals, closing more sales, keeping customers longer. Those things add up real quick in dollars. So who should that be? Who is it now? And who should it be in defining that upfront? Going to jump into our next insight here. Why? Why is the message falling apart? Why is dilution happening? We got a variety of different sources of responses in the study from the data that we collected. Some was from short answers, some was from specific questions where we gathered hard data. But we saw three themes emerge here. Size of the organization. We're big. We're a big company. It's hard. One person said when you're 80,000 people, it's hard to keep the message consistent. Okay. Silos. We're a fragmented organization. We grew by acquisition. So we have a lot of different departments. We have a lot of different teams. So getting people singing from the same song sheet is very difficult. The third was speed. So the respondent said, the message is changing quickly. We get new messages all the time. We're in the process of a rebrand. It's sort of always in flux. And we actually had some specific questions. If you download the study, you'll see there's a full section on this, which was we asked, how frequently are you bringing new products, services, promotions to market? What does your go-to-market flow look like? And what we heard was, and again, this is one where I was actually surprised. 52% of the respondents said they were bringing new products to market on a quarterly basis. Quarterly, every 90 days, there was some sort of new product introduction. 48% said they were introducing new services on a quarterly basis. In nearly 3/4, so 73% of the respondents said they were introducing new promotions or campaigns on a quarterly basis. So 73% for campaigns and promotions, 52% for products, 48% for new services on a quarterly basis. If you think about how much that means you are asking your frontline teams to process on a every 90-day basis, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to be wildly successful and your customers are going to adopt everything, or you are going to be introducing so many things down to the marketplace through your internal teams and your customer-facing teams that the teams and the marketplace simply can't handle all of it. They can't handle all of the new things you're bringing to market, and a lot of these initiatives die on the vine. There's plenty of research. We have research partners that have done years and decades worth of work on what the actual success rate of a new company initiative is. It's about 60% of the new initiatives are successful. So that means 40% fail. So why do 40% fail? If you're introducing things at this rate and your own people can't digest them and adopt them as fast as you're introducing them, they're not going to be successful as they need to be. So you end up spending a lot on research and development, on product launches, on advertising, but the rubber never hits the road because you're introducing them so quickly. So those were the three that we saw as really the primary drivers of why the message was getting diluted. So the question then becomes sort of, what do you do about that? And I'll get into the key insights in a second, but the reality is the size and the silos, that's not going to go away for any of the respondents. The respondents all face that, but their competition does as well. It's not as if most of these companies are dealing with a much smaller, more nimble competitor. They're dealing with other large organizations that are serving the consumer market, and they're going to deal with the same things. So I want to give Zoe a chance to react and provide some of the feedback on this.
Yeah, I think that this was a really interesting set of findings that we got from this. And I completely agree with size. That's just something that has to be dealt with, because as you just said, your competitors they're in the same boat, and it's a challenge, and it will forever remain a challenge. I think with silos, I think this is an incredibly interesting one because it comes up in many different areas. If I think of the field that I'm in terms of customer insight, we know that there are silos even between, say, the insights team and maybe marketing, and even customer experience. But there are silos across even closely related departments. And whilst I think, yes, this is something that isn't going to go away due to the fact of organizational structure, I mean, we're always going to have departments. We're always going to have areas that this is IT is going to focus on IT and marketing is going to focus on marketing. Yet we are at a time where we need to work as organizations to not let those structures be siloed in terms of operating, that there's collaboration. And so I do think that overall this is a challenge facing organizations. We all face it, and all having to work to how do we come together. And I think that piece is ongoing. But that said, I completely agree with you on speed just being dizzying is the word that I'm seeing on screen here, and I agree. And I think this has also been one of the biggest changes that's come in. As we've gone, if we think the experience economy, you mentioned, sort of was first coined in the late 1990s. And as part of all of this and what's brought up with the internet age and with social media and just and mass media and global media and all these different things, the speed has the new factor. Nobody is saying, hey, take your time to do this. We're gonna, we have all the time in the world, and that's just not the environment that we operate in. And so I do fully agree that a massive challenge and changing challenge has been speed and how this is impacting organizations.
Zoe, those are great points. I think that, you brought up the experience economy again. I think that anybody could look at this slide and throw their hands up in the air and say, oh, well, those things are never going to change. Okay. But with the challenge that we've uncovered here, I really do believe it creates a huge opportunity. The companies that are going to win in the experience economy and truly stand out are the ones that are going to try to find ways not to solve this. This is, in my mind, this is not a solvable problem. This is a matter of degrees of better. And if you can get a couple degrees better and address some of these challenges and manage size and jump across and knock down walls between the silos and to try to manage your speed a little bit differently, I think that those are the organizations that are going to see real tangible difference, and they're going to connect better with their customers. Again, it needs to be about the customer. You can't say, oh, well, we're siloed, so sorry, customer, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, too bad, we're siloed. We're not on the same page. Customer or companies aren't going to have the luxury of saying that anymore. And a lot of them have been saying it for years. They're going to run out of runway. They're not going to have the chance to say that anymore.
Yep, I agree.
I'm going to jump into okay. So we talked about this a little bit. You can't fix size, but you can watch your speed. And what we mean by this is you're probably not going to stop introducing things at a fast pace. It's how you introduce them that needs to catch up. You need to be, having a similarly dynamic conversation with your people that you're having with your customers. You have to equip them in a way that is different in the past. And I don't want to steal the punchline at the end of this session, but when we think about speed, it really is something where thinking about. I'll give you a great example. One of our clients that we work with was bringing they go to market through specialty retail, and they were bringing a new program to market. And our advice to them was, don't let this slow leak out. Don't let the information go out in drips and drabs. Hold it a little bit longer. Just wait a little bit longer. Let the story crystallize a little bit more. Make sure you've got it controlled. Make sure you've got it set in stone. And then let's get it out to your frontline team in a very structured, managed way. So if they would have waited, if they had not waited the extra month it took to do that, there would have been a fragmented message. And the reality was the month didn't really have that big of an impact. And it actually didn't push back their go-to-market date. It just pushed back some of their internal mechanisms. But by getting that story straight on the front end, I love using the phrase, go slow to go fast. By going a little bit slower on the front end, they were able to move much more quickly in a much more consistent fashion just by waiting a little bit longer. So it's not necessarily that you have to stop bringing things to market. It's just understand how you can manage speed in your own organization. And managing that speed helps to mitigate the size. It helps to knock down the walls of the silos. So we believe speed really is a trigger that can help you manage some of those other two more structural or organizational that you're generally not going to fix. Going to move us into our last key insight here, which marketers need a new approach. So, and I say marketers, but again, this goes back to, it might be different people in different organizations, but we truly believe, and I had a great conversation recently with Zoe and Dawn, who is the CMO of FocusVision, and we all believe that the marketing organization and the people responsible for the brand, their scope of influence inside an organization is growing every single day. Everything ties back to brand. Brand is what the experience economy is all about. Brand is how people perceive you. It's how they perceive your promises. It's all about what you're telling customers you can do for them and then actually delivering on it. So we do believe that if it's not the primary role of marketers to be doing this, or customer experience teams, they should be heavily involved in driving what the strategy is. So do they need a new approach? Instead of just handing it off to the training team and saying, I'm done with that, we're good, how can they be looking for ways to better ingrain their brand and a consistent brand story into everything their organization does, especially at the front lines? So when we asked the respondents in the study, what are the tactics you are using to engage your front lines when you bring something new to market, a new product launch, a new promotion, new pricing? How are you engaging them? And this probably will come as no shock to the people on the webinar that the top two that we got for both most frequent and most effective were email and product training. We inform people what's going on through email, and we put them through product training. So think about that for a minute. Let that soak in for a minute. When you think about how you want to engage with content, when you think about what your organization is doing, do you truly believe, and I can understand why they're the most frequent, but if they are the most effective based on what the respondent said, why is the gap so big in the consistency? If that's how you're equipping your team, but we know there's a huge consistency gap, is there potentially a problem with the methodology here? So what we did is we looked at, for the people who had confidence that their organization had a consistent message, what is it that they were doing? What were they doing to try to equip their frontline teams? Where was the delta between, were there a couple of tactics that really seemed to be driving a difference, that over-indexed for the people that had confidence across their organization? So we found three. We found three that actually, not three, the top three that over-indexed between the top confidence group and the bottom confidence group were three things. Internal research and insights gathering. So we were delighted to hear that at InnerView. We have a process called the brand transfer score and the brand transfer study, which takes market research principles and applies them inside the organization. What do your people think of the product? What do they think of your brand? What do they think of your new pricing and promotion rollout? We gather input from them to help adjust the internal campaign. But that research is incredibly valuable. And we heard from the respondents that really, when I talk about over-indexing, it was more of a driver of confidence than things like email and product training. Events was another one. Zoe, did you have something to share?
Yeah, while you're still on internal research and insights, if I could build on that, because I think that was a really interesting point that it came out so strongly. And so we did take a look at, well, having like we did here on those people with strong confidence that their brand story was aligned within the organization, those that felt that it wasn't. And there was a couple of things that stood out there. One was the variety of research methods used. So those with high confidence, well, everybody talks about doing a survey and focus groups. Those came up, sort of across the board. But what was interesting, those with high confidence that their story was aligned across the organization, they used more of a variety. So not just surveys and focus groups, but they did more in-depth interviews. And they used online research communities, online diary, bulletin boards, and so on. And I think that's kind of interesting, just, hey, we can speak to our customers and we're going to do it in a variety of ways. And that's going to give them sort of richer insights. So that was the one part of it. The other part was, and I think this is really interesting, we talked about leveraging the insights when we were talking about our key finding one. When we looked at those with brand alignment and the confidence that their story was being told consistently across the organization, 73% of them said, yeah, we leverage our research to inform brand and product messaging every time, a lot of the times. They were the ones that were using it almost consistently. And those with low confidence, well, it was around 45%, so less than half were actually leveraging it. So it seems that internal research and insights is a big driver of actually, and has a key role to play in actually creating that consistent brand story throughout the organization. Well, it's one of them. I know you're going to talk about the other two as well, but I just thought that was an interesting point to jump in with at this point.
I appreciate that, Zoe, and I think it goes right back to the previous key finding, which was this idea of speed. And most organizations, and the reality is most organizations say, have new product, have new service, build product training, build a one sheet, push it down through the funnel, whether it's internal, external partners, if they have retail partners or distributors or channel partners, just push information out, push, push, push. And the idea of this being more of a dialogue and taking a little bit more time, and frankly, might not even take that much more time to do the step of gathering the internal research and the insights so you can understand that internal audience before you provide the messaging, really does seem to be driving the confidence that there's consistency across the organization. So it really seems like both the external and the internal research and data gathering does pay significant dividends toward the alignment of the brand message, which, as you can imagine, delighted both Zoe and I, because you would hope to see something like that, but you don't know if that's how it's going to play out. This was probably the one where our jaws dropped a little bit and we're like, wow, how interesting is it that this has actually played out with data? The other two, I do want to point out, are events. So launch events, I would call an experiential type tactic. Creating an experience for your internal teams or your partners around your brand. So it's not just being told information, it's experiencing it, maybe not in exactly the same way that your customers would, but providing them a different type of internal experience so they can internalize the brand, so they can see what it is, so they can feel it. We talk about at InnerView all the time, belief, confidence, and pride. If you want people to have belief, confidence, and pride in your brand, you have to show them that's not just something that you can have a trainer stand up or a product training go out via the computer and drive belief, confidence, and pride. You have to build that in and instill that in. Events are a great way to do that. Finally, we saw peer-to-peer learning. Another thing that we believe strongly InnerView is a great tactic, but the peer-to-peer learning, the best part about peer-to-peer learning is a lot of that can be done on the fly. This is not something that costs a tremendous amount of money, and it's not something that takes a lot of time. This can be done in the margins, where you're allowing your team to interact with one another to talk about what's working, what's not, how have they been representing the brand, what phrasing has really been connecting with customers. That peer-to-peer aspect can be done in the margins. And to me, that enables a much more agile, speedy, responsive organization and it allows you to manage the speed that's happening. To me, this is one of those levers that you can pull to put people in a position where they can actually keep up with the rate of new introduction and the rate of speed. If they have a mechanism built around peer-to-peer where they can be learning things in micro segments as opposed to having to wait for the full new product training to come down. Well, I don't understand it, or I'm struggling with this. Okay, product training goes back and builds it. 75 days later, a product training rolls out. And by that point, the initiative may have died. So building that agility into the organization through really all three of these tactics, I believe build-in agility is really key to helping manage the speed that we talked about in the previous. And by the way, they're more fun and they're more engaging. People are going to respond to them better. But we were very interested to see those come out.
I'm just going to add
in terms
a point
of the
here, Chris.
Sure, go ahead.
You just said more fun and engaging, and that just resonates with me on we're in the experience economy, and we're all people, we're all individuals in it, and we all want, whether we're being a consumer, a customer, and we're after an experience, but also as just in our individual lives and as employees as well, we're after an experience. And so something that's more engaging, it makes sense that that's going to help make that information resonate and be absorbed. And so it makes a lot of sense. And I know it's kind of jumping a little bit to our conclusions, but it was a point that stood out to me.
No, I appreciate that, Zoe. I do. I think, and we're getting on to the conclusions here. I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but the reality is I'm going to keep this one super simple. Do something new. Email and product training. If somebody came to you, if you're a marketer, if you're on this call and you're a marketer, and one of your team members or one of your agencies came to you and said, for our next product launch, I've got a great idea. We're going to do an email campaign to our customers. And you look at the email campaign, it's going to go to a bunch of Yahoo and Hotmail accounts, and you say, okay, what else are we going to do? And you say, no, that's the campaign. We're going to do an email campaign. That's going to be our acquisition campaign. That's how we're going to influence the audience. You would say that's not enough. And when you look at what organizations do to equip their teams, we feel the same way. Yes, you have to do email. And yes, it's a great, efficient way to get information out there, but it's not going to change behavior. So when you think about the ways that you want to drive a more consistent message, try something new. And we can talk about what some of those are. We previewed them on the last slide, what some of the tactics are. There's other ideas that we have in the white paper if you do download it and read it. But generally speaking, new is better. Do something different or in addition to email and product training that allows your team to experience the message in a different way. And that sort of leads us to our final point today, which is our conclusion. Zoe, I'm going to let you take this one because I was actually sitting in the exact same spot I am now when Zoe sort of had this aha of what this data was telling us. So I'm going to let you take this away.
Yeah, and I think I'd started to jump in there before because I do strongly believe in it, is that, we know that the dialogue between marketing and customers is more dynamic. That this is the world that we're in. We've moved from a single one push message from brands, just giving information about this is the product or service that I have and here's the benefits of it and this is why you want it. And, that's a very 1950s, 1960s madman type model. Whereas we're now in a sort of a two-way exchange. And so it is a dynamic conversation and layering in this whole idea of experience that come with it. And so that kind of leads to this, well, customers who want a consistent, companies who want a consistent experience need to have a more dynamic dialogue internally. It's not just about having that dynamic dialogue with your customers. That's incredibly important, but do it with your employees as well, because that's could be the big change and positive change factor going on here. It plays both ways. I'm sure you've got something to build there, Chris.
I think that's very well said. I really do believe that marketers have more tools available to them than ever to drive that dialogue with the customers, and it allows them to be nimble and responsive from a messaging standpoint. But to quote one of my clients, they said, we have to stop having our customers inform our employees about our products and services. I'm going to play that back. We need to stop having our customers informing our employees about our products and services. They saw that happening, and it was because they were pushing out so much information through marketing and learning what the customers wanted and adjusting and acting in a dynamic fashion and communicating in a dynamic fashion with the customers, that the customers were actually getting it better than the employees were. So you think about the experience that sets up. If the customer is more informed than the employee in terms of truly being able to articulate why something is good, why it's better than the competition, if the customer knows that more than the person that they're on the phone with or the person they're standing in front of in the retail store, then you find yourself in a spot where you lose trust in that brand. You don't feel like you can trust the promises that they're making to you. So that idea of marketers have all the tools to interact with their customers dynamically, but are relying on product training and email as the primary vehicles to interact with their teams, we really do believe that needs to catch up. That, to me, that was the ultimate conclusion, is they need to catch up in the way that they involve and engage their internal teams. So I think that that covers the program that we have for today. I think we do have some time for questions.
Yes, we do indeed, and we have a few in, and if you have a question, please do type it in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get as many as we can. I know we're running short in time, but let's. I'm actually just going to the one here that talks about peer-to-peer learning, and I'm not sure if we do have an answer to this, Chris, but let me read it out. So, generally speaking, did you find that peer-to-peer learning is a formal process, or is it a culture of peers informally sharing best practices?
So excellent question. So I'm going to say it's a little bit of both, but I do think it's and so we've seen, there's one organization that we've gotten to know quite well over the years that we've seen do this extremely well, where they have a team called Voice of the Front Lines, where they have a very formalized process whereby they are gathering information from the people who are on the phones, in the stores, things like that, and they have tens of thousands of people on the front lines. They're systematically gathering the input from them and responding in almost on-demand fashion to them. That is I would call the ideal and sort of the gold standard that we've ever seen. But on a more informal basis, I do believe you can be setting up time or setting aside time for teams to be having those quick conversations about what's working, what's not. It could be as simple as taking people and having a little buddy system. And they're responsible for interacting with each other 10 minutes a day in between shifts or whenever they can find a couple of minutes in between calls, whatever it is, to say, I just had a call where I was talking about this. It really seemed to resonate. What do you think about that? Oh, that sounds good. I'm going to try that. What I found worked was this. So almost carve in an informal basis, you can carve out just a little bit of time and set up a very light structure to the peer-to-peer interactions. But that's where the lightning bolts happen. That's where the ahas happen for those frontline people, is through that peer-to-peer interaction. We believe very strongly that it's much more powerful when it comes from a peer than it comes from a trainer or somebody at corporate.
Okay, great. And I think a final question, just given that we're running up in time, going back to key findings 2, and are there any companies that you think are doing a consistent job from top to bottom with their brand stories? So this person was thinking of 2 in particular, Pottery Barn and Costco resonated with them. What about you, Chris? Do you have any that come to mind? And if so, what do you think that they're able to do this? Why do you think they're able to do this and other big businesses haven't?
So I'm going to throw out a couple that are from my perception. Maybe not. I mean, I haven't done a brand transfer study with them, but I can tell you a couple from my perception that, and a lot of the writing that we do, we reference a number of times. I'm not going to use Southwest or Ablick. Those are the ones people always hear. But a local company here, Subaru, I think that Subaru does an excellent job of having consistency of their brand message from the corporate team all the way down through their dealer base. And I think a lot of you can laugh thinking about experience you've had with auto brands over the years and whether or not you feel like the brand you see on television is the brand you experience in the dealership. It's almost comical to think about, but I think that Subaru does an excellent job of truly living their brand all the way down to the point of transaction. And another one I'll say is TD Bank. I think that you've seen TD Bank really make investments in their customer experience and try to stand out based on their experience and the experience that they deliver, the convenience that they deliver to customers, and backing that up by equipping the teams in the branches at the front lines to really be able to deliver on that promise and have a mechanism in place whereby it's not idle It's not idle promises the brand is making. It's truly backed up, and they have buy-in through the organization. So I'll throw those out as two that from my perception, seem to be doing a nice job with it.
It's great. Well, thank you, Chris. And to be honest, thank you for the entire webinar. We've reached our time now. I think this was a really interesting conversation. I certainly enjoyed having it with you, and I hope everybody on the line listening in enjoyed it and found it helpful as well. And with that,
thanks to everybody for attending. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, let's wrap up.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks so much to you and Chris for joining us today. Great presentation. Unfortunately, it looks like we've reached the end of our time together. If there were any questions that didn't get answered today, we'll follow up soon. Or you can email us at webinars@focusvision.com and we'll respond to your question at that time. We hope you enjoyed the webinar today. Have your story straight, why brand message dilution hurts in the experience economy. We hope to see you at future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.